Let's start tonight with a simple intellectual exercise. Can you count how many places, homes, apartments have you lived in your life so far? Do some accounting in your head. From the place you were born, well, the hospital doesn't count, but your first home, then your second home, your college perhaps, your first job, then you got married, moved to a bigger house, moved again, then you downsized to a smaller house. How many places, houses, and apartments have you lived in so far? Lori? 11. How about you, James? 7 only? That's not bad. Anybody can beat 11? 13. Going. 15? 18? No, 15. Is 15 the maximum so far? Not bad, isn't it? They say Americans are one of the most mobile nations in the history of the humanity. Very few people before our American experience have moved as often as we are moving and changing our environment. Now, where I come from, people used to be born, raised, and died in the same place. You would go to the same church. You were baptized in the same church. You were buried from the same church. Not in this country. We keep moving for a better job, for a better wife, for a better life, for a better husband, for better church, for any other reason. We find a reason to move away, to find different place, different environment, different community perhaps. In this way, we are very much unlike Europeans, but very much like the Jews of the Old Testament. You see, the story of the chosen nation goes back to Abraham. And to be precise, it's not only Jewish story. We Christians look at Abraham as our father in faith as well. And to be funny, the Muslims look at Abraham as their founding father as well. If you go to Hebron today, just 30 or 40 miles south of Jerusalem, Hebron is in the occupied territory, and the tomb, the grave of Abraham, is in the middle of a Muslim mosque. The Muslims look at Abraham as their father in faith as well. So we have three major groups of people, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, who claim that Abraham is their founding father. But look at today's first reading, how the story of Abraham began. He was a successful merchant, a rich man, who lived in Ur, spelled U-R, in what today is Iraq. And one day, out of the blue, the Genesis says, a voice of God instructed him, you know what? Pack up your belongings, pack up your wives, and move the promised land in Canaan, in the very outskirts of civilization. It is as if someone told you, pack up and move to the Ozarks. Leave behind your civilization, leave behind your opera, your forest park, your Fox theater, and go to the middle of nowhere, the God-forsaken land, and live with those hillbillies. And Abram actually listened. He packed up all he had, dozens, perhaps more slaves, lots of property, and he began his journey. He became a nomad. His life from this time on was about constant moving, about constant journey. He arrived to the promised land, but guess what? It wasn't empty. It was inhabited. So he kept moving. Eventually he found himself in Egypt. Then his wife, being exotic, not Egyptian, was so desirable by others that he had to move away from Egypt. Abram and Sarah spent their lives with their carry-on luggage always ready to travel. They were always packed. They were always ready to go. From that moment on, in today's first reading, when God told them, you know what? Pack up your life and move away. The life of Abram, later Abraham, is in a constant moving process. So we Americans, even those with a thick Polish accent, keep moving as well. We don't ever settle anywhere for a long enough time to get bored. But on the other hand, we are living very sedentary lifestyle. Most of us have become couch potatoes. We keep moving from place to place, but moving our bodies is becoming more and more challenging. We keep moving because we have cars and trucks and bikes, but when it comes to moving physically, your legs and feet and arms, we use them for raising the glasses and the remote control on your TV. How many of you have ever used a treadmill? Raise your hand. Good. Treadmill is a first world invention. We use treadmills because we drive everywhere, so we have to pretend we are moving when we are at home. Your grocery store might be 2 blocks away, but you take your car from the garage and drive there. When you come home with your donuts, you get on your treadmill and start exercising. Makes perfect sense, right? Only in America. You know, my mother wakes up every morning and she goes to her local bakery about 2 blocks away to get fresh croissants and buns for breakfast. That woman is a skinny person because she walks everywhere all the time, unlike her beloved son. I got a treadmill. Why should I walk anywhere? I can walk at home. You see how oxymoronic it sounds? We are the most mobile society in the history of humankind. We keep moving and changing our places. Some of you have lived in 15 homes, but we can't get off our couches. We buy treadmills and elliptical machines to give us a sense of being in motion. You know, these days, people talk about fake news all the time, right? This is fake movement in your home. You pretend you are going somewhere, but you ain't. You pretend you are moving, but you are not. We have come to a point when it's easier to move from New York to California than to get your groceries 2 blocks away from your home. It is easier to become a citizen of different state than to stand up from your couch and bring your beer yourself from the fridge. Honey, Can you get me a glass of beer? We are becoming a very unique society that is very mobile and at the same time very sedentary. You see, the journey of faith is all about journey and movement. You cannot be a couch potato as a Christian. You've got to be moving forward. You've got to be moving from your Ur to a new destination. You have to follow in the footsteps of Abraham and Jesus and be on a go. If your spiritual life is content where you are today, then you are spiritual couch potato. And perhaps you are using your spiritual treadmill to pretend that you are still developing, that you have spiritual muscles, but you are going nowhere. How many of you have read a religious or spiritual book this year? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, good. The other 60 people failed. How many of you have prayed with a piece of Holy Bible this week? 4. Worse. How many of you have done an act of almsgiving this season of Lent? Almsgiving. Giving food to the hungry, to the poor, taking care of those who are less privileged than you are. You see, spiritual life cannot be satisfied with where you are today. Spiritual life is by definition American adventure. Spiritual life is about moving from one place to another, about journeying with God, with Abraham, and with Jesus. When Jesus was transfigured in front of James, John, and Peter, Peter said, "Hey, I like this. Can we build some 3 tents over here and settle down? We don't need to go anywhere else. This is perfect where we are." And Jesus looks at him and says, "Dude, are you out of your mind? We are not settling down anywhere. This experience was good for you now, here, today. But tomorrow there will be a new experience. Tomorrow a new adventure awaits you." Many Christians, especially Catholics, are content with their faith as it was when they received their first communion. Now, when we got to first communion, we had to memorize all these commandments, precepts, all the rules, regulations. And once you got your first communion, that's over. And for this reason, we have people in their 40s, 50s, 70s, and 80s who have the religious education on the level of their first communion class. We have stopped moving at that level of first communion, if you are lucky, perhaps confirmation class. But think of your professional education. If you stopped learning and moving 20 or 40 years ago, you will be fired immediately. If you stopped learning on the level of your high school diploma, you would not get any job today. We have to become more in motion in our spiritual life as we are in our physical lives. If you are unable to make a journey in a real lifetime, how about we invent spiritual treadmills? Now, perhaps a treadmill is not such a bad thing, because it forces us to make some minimal movements at least. How about we use spiritual treadmills to exercise our souls? Don't be content with being spiritual couch potato. Don't be content with knowing what you know, with being where you are, with having no spiritual or intellectual curiosity anymore. Strive to learn new things. Read a book or two a year about spiritual or religious life. Pray a prayer that perhaps your father or grandmother taught you. Maybe you need to compose your own prayer. Maybe you need to read the Bible once in a blue moon. But do not be content with what you know, with where you are, with what you have achieved. God is calling you and me to be like Abraham. God is calling you to be on the go. Pick up your 4 letters, get on your spiritual treadmill, and start moving. Because the life of faith can and should be an exciting adventure. Amen.